The airport was crowded that morning, a sea of rolling suitcases, loudspeaker announcements, and tired travelers. Among them was a man named David, a single father traveling with his young son Ethan. David wore jeans and a simple jacket, carrying a backpack slung over his shoulder. To everyone else, he looked like just another passenger. Nothing about him stood out, except the quiet strength in his eyes. Ethan clutched his father's hand tightly as they walked toward their gate. "Dad, are you sure we'll see the planes today?" he asked eagerly, his eyes shining with excitement. David smiled. "Yes, buddy. You'll see them. And maybe, if we're lucky, you'll even see a fighter jet." They boarded their commercial flight like everyone else, taking their seats in row 12. David sat in 12F by the window with Ethan beside him. For the other passengers, this was just an ordinary flight. But for David, it would turn into something no one on board would ever forget. As the engines roared to life and the plane lifted into the sky, Ethan pressed his face against the window, watching the ground shrink below. "Dad, do you think pilots ever get bored of flying?" David chuckled softly. "Not the kind of pilots I used to know." The boy frowned in curiosity. "What do you mean?" But before David could answer, the captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but slightly tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just been informed that 2 U.S. Air Force F-22 Raptors will be escorting us for a short time due to nearby military activity. There is no danger. This is a routine procedure." Excited murmurs filled the cabin. Passengers craned their necks to the windows. Soon, sleek gray fighter jets appeared, one on each side of the plane, flying in perfect formation. Their presence was intimidating, powerful, and beautiful all at once. Ethan gasped. "Dad, look! F-22s!" His little face was pressed so hard to the glass that fog covered the window. The pilots inside the Raptors adjusted their position, maintaining tight formation. One of them, the lead, tilted his jet slightly, and for a moment his helmeted face was visible through the canopy. Ethan waved enthusiastically. The passengers clapped and cheered at the sight, some taking out their phones to record the rare event. But then something happened that stunned everyone. The fighter pilots radioed the commercial cockpit with a request. "Commercial Flight 742, do you have a passenger named Viper on board?" The captain's voice, filled with confusion, came back. "Say again?" The fighter pilot repeated firmly. "We are requesting confirmation. Is call sign Viper on board your aircraft?" A ripple of confusion spread through the cabin as the flight attendants exchanged puzzled looks. Who was Viper? The captain finally came over the loudspeaker. "Attention passengers. We've received an unusual request from the escorting aircraft. If there is anyone here who recognizes the call sign Viper, please press your call button." Silence. Then slowly, David reached up and pressed his. Every eye in row 12 turned toward him. The flight attendant hurried over. "Sir, do you know what this is about?" she whispered. David exhaled slowly. "Yes, tell the captain. Viper is in 12F. She blinked, stunned. Without another word, she relayed the message. Within seconds, the radio chatter resumed between the cockpit and the Raptors. The fighter pilots, upon hearing the confirmation, broke formation for a moment. Both jets dipped their wings in unison, an unmistakable sign of respect. Then, in a move that made every passenger gasp, the Raptors straightened and flew parallel, holding perfectly steady. It was not routine. It was tribute. In the cabin, whispers turned into questions. Who is he? What's going on? Why are the military jets saluting him? Ethan tugged his father's sleeve. Dad, what's happening? Why are they calling you Viper? David placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his voice low. Because that was my call sign a long time ago. The truth was finally revealed. Years earlier, David hadn't just been any pilot. He had been one of the most skilled fighter pilots in the Air Force. Known by his call sign, Viper, he had led countless missions, saved lives, and earned the respect of every man and woman who had ever flown beside him. But when his wife passed away, he left it all behind to raise Ethan alone. For him, being a father was the most important mission of all. But his reputation had never been forgotten. To the new generation of pilots flying those F-22s, Viper was a legend. They had trained on his maneuvers, studied his missions, and grown up hearing his name. To spot him on a random passenger flight was unthinkable, but an honor they could never ignore. As the Raptors held their formation, one pilot's voice came through the cabin speakers again, relayed by the captain. To the passenger in 12F Viper, sir. It's an honor. We stand at attention. The entire cabin erupted in awe. Some passengers cried, others clapped, and many simply sat in stunned silence. David, normally quiet and reserved, felt his throat tighten. He gave a small nod toward the window, knowing the pilots would see it. Ethan's eyes were wide. "Dad, you never told me." David smiled gently. "I didn't think it mattered anymore. But maybe it still does." For the rest of the flight, the F-22 stayed with them, guardians in the sky. When the plane finally approached its destination, the Raptors pulled ahead, banking away with one final dip of their wings. The passengers clapped again, some even standing to applaud David as if he were royalty. When they landed, strangers approached him with gratitude. A veteran in the back of the plane saluted him. A young boy whispered, "I want to be like you one day." But David shook his head humbly and said only, "Be brave. Be kind. That's all that matters." Ethan squeezed his father's hand, his chest bursting with pride. To him, his dad wasn't just the man in 12F anymore. He was Viper, the hero of the skies, and as they walked off the plane together, David knew that while he had left behind the cockpit years ago, his legacy still soared among the clouds, carried on by those who had once looked up to him. The passengers would never forget the day an ordinary flight turned extraordinary. All because a single dad, sitting quietly in 12F, was more than anyone ever imagined. If you liked the video, then make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe.